There's a particular kind of silence that settles into a house when something is wrong, but no one has said it yet. Not the comfortable silence of two people who don't need to fill every moment with words. Not the peaceful kind that comes after a long day when you're both tired and grateful just to be home. This was different. This was the silence of a man sitting at a dinner table, alone, for the fourth night in a row. Plate set, food cooling, the fork he hadn't picked up yet. Ryan worked in logistics, supply chains, distribution networks, the kind of work that required patience and precision, the ability to track moving parts across long distances and notice when something, somewhere, was off by just a fraction. He was good at it, quietly good at it. The kind of person who didn't announce what he noticed, he just filed it away. He and Jessica had been married 5 years. They had a shared Google Calendar, a joint savings account, and a standing plan to buy a bigger house once things settled down. They weren't flashy. They weren't the couple that posted every dinner out or anniversary trip. They were, in Ryan's words, solid. He believed that for a long time. The first thing he noticed wasn't the late nights. It wasn't the new clothes or the perfume that had shifted from something light to something heavier, more deliberate. It wasn't even the way she angled her phone away from him when a message came in. It was the fork. Every evening, before Jessica started coming home late, before any of this, she had a habit of straightening the silverware on her side of the table before she sat down. A small thing. Automatic. She didn't even know she did it. Then, one night, she stopped. She rushed in, kissed him on the cheek, said she'd already eaten, and disappeared into the bedroom. The fork on her side sat slightly crooked on the placemat. Ryan stared at it for a long moment. He didn't say anything. He picked up his own fork and finished his dinner. That was the first night. There would be many more. The messages started arriving around 7 in the evening. Big project, babe. Don't wait up. Then, a few nights later, boss needs this by morning. Overtime pays well. For our future. Ryan read each one at the kitchen counter, phone in hand, the dinner he'd made still warm on the stove. He didn't write back anything dramatic. Just, okay, be safe. And then he'd put his phone down, cover the extra plate, and sit. He's not the kind of man who jumps to conclusions. That matters. Because what came next wasn't a reaction. It was an observation. Jessica had started dressing differently for work. Not dramatically. Nothing that would read as obvious to a stranger. But Ryan had known this woman for 7 years. He noticed the blazers had gotten sharper. The heels, newer. The makeup, more considered. She was presenting herself differently, and not for client meetings alone. He noticed. He said nothing. What he did instead was something that came naturally to him. The same thing he did at work when a shipment's numbers didn't add up. He started paying attention to patterns. She left between 6:30 and 6:50 most evenings. She returned between 10 and 11. Her phone, which used to sit on the kitchen counter while she cooked, now stayed in her pocket or face down on the nightstand. When it lit up, she moved to another room. Once, he walked in mid-call. She ended it within seconds. Just work stuff, she said, smiling. He nodded. The intimacy had quietly disappeared too. Not all at once, but in the slow, erosive way that things disappear when no one is tending to them. Excuses arrived softly. Exhausted. Early meeting. Can we just rest tonight? And then the rolling over. The back turned. The glow of the phone under the covers. Ryan lay in the dark many of those nights, staring at the ceiling, running the numbers in his head the way he would a shipping manifest. Something was missing. Something didn't reconcile. He ordered the GPS tracker on a Tuesday. It arrived Thursday. Small, magnetic, the size of a matchbox. He placed it under her car on a Friday evening while she was in the shower. His hands didn't shake. That surprised him, but only for a moment. She left at 6:40, kissed him on the cheek, said it would be a long night. He watched the blue dot on his phone move through the neighborhood, turn toward downtown, then veer left, away from her office, into a residential area on the east side of the city he didn't recognize. The dot stopped on a quiet street and stayed there. Ryan sat with that information for 10 minutes. Then he drove. He parked a block away and walked. The house was ordinary. A single-family home on a quiet street, neat lawn, porch light on. The kind of house that blends into any American suburb without leaving an impression. Nothing about it announced what was happening inside. But the blinds in the front window were partially open. Ryan stood in the shadow of a tree across the street and looked through that narrow gap of warm, golden light. And he saw them. He recognized the man immediately. He'd seen him once, briefly, picking Jessica up from work after her car was in the shop. She'd introduced him in passing. "That's Dave, my manager. He's harmless." Harmless. Ryan stood there for a long moment. Long enough to understand exactly what he was looking at. Long enough for the first wave of something enormous to move through him. And then, strangely, recede. He turned and walked back to his car. He didn't kick the door in. He didn't call her name. He didn't do any of the things that the version of himself from 5 years ago might have done. The version that still believed the right response to pain was to make it loud. He sat in the driver's seat, hands on the wheel, and breathed. Then he opened his notes app and began typing. Dates, times, locations. The name David Richardson, Senior Director of Marketing. He typed without rushing, the way you document something you intend to use. That night, he drove home, poured himself a drink he barely touched, and opened his laptop. Not to spiral, not to send an angry email or post something he'd regret. He researched. Quietly, methodically. He looked into what constitutes evidence of adultery in his state and how it affects asset division in divorce proceedings. He looked at what his name was on. The mortgage, the retirement account, the deed. He read until nearly 2 a.m, then closed the laptop and went to bed. Jessica came home at 11:15. He heard her key in the lock, heard her move through the kitchen, heard her ease into bed beside him, trying not to wake him. He kept his breathing slow and even. She was asleep within minutes. He lay there in the dark, completely still, and made a decision that had nothing to do with anger and everything to do with clarity. He was going to let her keep going. He was going to smile over breakfast and ask about her day and say, "Don't wait up," like a man who had no idea. And in the meantime, he was going to build something airtight. Not out of cruelty, out of self-preservation. There is a particular kind of discipline required to keep moving normally through a life that has already quietly ended. Ryan had that discipline. He'd spent years developing it, without knowing he'd ever need it for something like this. He used it now. The next 2 weeks were the quietest Ryan had ever lived. He made coffee in the mornings. He asked how she slept. He mentioned things he'd heard on the radio during his commute, and listened to her responses with the patience of someone who had already decided the conversation didn't matter. He was present enough to be invisible. Unremarkable enough to be trusted. Jessica suspected nothing. Why would she? He hadn't changed his tone, hadn't withdrawn, hadn't asked a single uncomfortable question. To her, he was exactly what he had always been. Steady, undemanding, easy to manage. That was her miscalculation. Every evening she left, Ryan tracked her. Same house, same window of time, usually between 7 and 10. He documented everything with the precision his job had trained into him. Screenshots of GPS data, time-stamped and labeled. Cross-references against her work calendar, which she had synced to their shared Google account without a second thought. He pulled up Dave Richardson's company profile, confirmed his title, his tenure, his photograph. He found his LinkedIn, saw the family photos, a wife named Jennifer, 2 daughters, a beach somewhere with good light. He saved everything to a private cloud folder, organized by date. He wasn't building a case out of rage. He was building one out of something quieter and more durable than rage. He was building it because he understood, perhaps better than most, that the person who controls the information controls the outcome, and he intended to control the outcome. The final piece was timing. He waited for a Friday. He waited for a night when Jessica was relaxed enough to be careless, when she'd delivered her apology in advance. "I know it's been a lot lately. I promise it'll slow down soon." And left at 6:30 with her guard completely down. He gave her 20 minutes. Then he drove to that quiet street on the east side of the city, parked where he always parked. And this time, he did something different. He opened a live streaming application on his phone. He angled the camera toward the bedroom window, where the blinds sat partially open, the warm light spilling through just enough. He adjusted the zoom. He could see them clearly. He watched the screen for a moment, not with grief, not with fury, but with the cold steadiness of a man confirming what he already knew. Then he opened WhatsApp, created a group, and added 14 people. Her parents, her siblings, her closest cousins, her favorite aunt. He typed one message: "I need you all to see something. I'm sorry, but this is the truth." He pasted the link. He pressed send. Then he sat back and watched. The responses came within seconds. Her mother first, then her sister, then her brother Henry in quick succession. Confusion giving way to recognition, giving way to something that moved through that group chat like a current. By the time her father's message arrived, short, formal, final, the stream had been running for 11 minutes. On the screen, Ryan watched Jessica's phone light up on the nightstand. Once, twice. She ignored it. Then it didn't stop. She reached for it. He watched her face change. He ended the stream at 9:14. 23 minutes of footage. He saved everything. The video, the screenshots, the GPS logs, to the cloud before he started the car. He drove home without music, without hurry. His hands were steady on the wheel, and the neighborhood passed by outside the window like any other Friday night, in any other ordinary life. He was home by 9:40. He didn't pour a drink. He didn't turn on the television. He went room by room through the house with a quiet, focused energy and began packing Jessica's belongings into black trash bags. Clothes, shoes, the makeup that had multiplied on the bathroom counter over the past few months, the perfume that no longer smelled like the woman he'd married. He worked without music, without hurry, without ceremony. 7 bags in total. He carried them to the front lawn and arranged them in a neat row near the driveway. Then he went back inside and changed the locks. He'd bought the hardware 2 days earlier. It took him 40 minutes. By 10 o'clock, the house was his again. She arrived at 10:41. He watched from the window as her car pulled slowly into the driveway, as she stepped out and stopped when she saw the bags. She stood there for a long moment under the porch light, very still, the way people go still when their mind is processing something it wasn't prepared for. Then she tried her key. When the door finally opened, it was because Ryan had opened it. He stood in the frame, calm, and looked at her without any particular expression. She started talking immediately. The words came fast and layered. Apologies and explanations and promises folded over one another in the way they do when someone is trying to find the combination that opens a lock. "I'm sorry. I made a mistake. We can fix this. Just let me in, please." Ryan listened to all of it. Then he said, quietly, "There's nothing to fix. Get your things and go." She tried to push past him. He held the door. She said he had ruined her life, that the public humiliation was unforgivable, that he had no right, that she deserved a conversation. He closed the door. He stood on his side of it and listened to her cry, listened to the knocking that gradually lost its urgency, listened to the silence that followed. Then he heard her car start, and then even that faded, and the street outside was just a street again. He sat on the couch in the dark for a while, not thinking anything in particular. Just sitting. In the days that followed, the consequences moved outward, the way consequences do when the truth has been made visible to enough people. HR at the company placed both Jessica and Dave on administrative leave. Dave's wife, Jennifer, filed for divorce within 48 hours. He resigned shortly after and relocated out of state. Jessica moved in temporarily with a friend, then to another city entirely. Her parents stopped answering her calls. Her brother had nothing to say to her. Even her sister, who had initially reached out trying to find some angle of defense, went quiet after Ryan sent her the full documentation. GPS logs, timestamps, the recorded footage. 3 words came back. "I'm so sorry." Ryan filed for divorce on the Monday after. His attorney reviewed the evidence and described it, without drama, as comprehensive. In their state, documented adultery carried weight in asset division proceedings. The house had been in Ryan's name before the marriage. The retirement account was structured the same way. Jessica's legal team opened negotiations and then, finding no ground to negotiate from, closed them again. The papers were signed 4 months later. She didn't contest them. Ryan walked out of the courthouse on a cold morning in early March and stood on the steps for a moment, hands in his coat pockets, watching the traffic move along the street below. There was no particular feeling attached to the moment. No relief, exactly. No triumph. Just the quiet, unremarkable sensation of something being finished. He walked to his car and drove to work. 6 months later, Ryan is sitting in his backyard on a Saturday afternoon. There is a beer on the armrest of his chair, half finished. The sky is the particular shade of blue that only appears in early autumn, when the heat has finally relented and the light comes in at a lower angle, and everything looks a little more considered than it did in summer. He's not doing anything in particular. That's new. For most of his adult life, Ryan had filled his weekends with the small industry of a shared life, errands that required 2 people, plans that needed coordinating, the low-level maintenance of a household built for more than one. Now the weekends are just his, quiet in a way that took some adjusting to, but quiet nonetheless. His phone buzzes once, a text from Emily, Jessica's younger sister. "She's not doing well. Just thought you should know." He reads it. He sets the phone face down on the armrest beside his beer. He looks back at the sky. He doesn't respond. Not out of cruelty, out of clarity. There is nothing useful he can offer Emily, and nothing she can offer him. That chapter has a last page, and he turned it 4 months ago in a courthouse on a cold March morning. What happens after the last page is not his story to carry. He thinks about Jessica sometimes, not with longing and not with bitterness either, which surprises him more than the longing would have. What he feels, when he feels anything at all, is closer to a kind of bewildered distance, like looking at a photograph of a place you once lived and finding it hard to remember what the room smelled like. He wonders sometimes whether she ever loved him in the way he understood love, whether the marriage was something she was building toward or something she was enduring while she waited for something else. He doesn't have an answer. He has stopped expecting one. Some people, when they heard what he did, called it excessive. A few mutual friends used the word cruel. One sent him a long message about dignity and private resolution and giving people the chance to explain themselves. Ryan read it, considered it, and filed it away with the other things he'd decided weren't his to carry. Because here is what he knows, and what he knew in the moment he sat in that car on a quiet residential street and made his decision. A private confrontation would have given Jessica the thing she was best at, controlling the narrative. She was quick and articulate, and she knew exactly how to position herself as the person who had been failed, who had been unseen, who had drifted towards something she hadn't planned. He had watched her do it in smaller conflicts over 5 years. He knew what a private conversation would have looked like. He would have emerged from it doubting himself. So he chose differently. Not out of vengeance, or not entirely. Out of the recognition that some truths require witnesses, that some patterns only break when they're exposed to enough light. Was it the right choice? He doesn't argue the point anymore. It was the choice he made, and he made it deliberately, and he lives in its aftermath the same way he lives in everything else, quietly, without excessive explanation. What he does know is simpler than any verdict on his methods. He knows he didn't lie. He didn't manipulate. He didn't construct a version of events designed to protect himself at someone else's expense. He showed people what was true, and he let the truth do what truth does when it's finally allowed into the room. The consequences that followed belong to the choices that preceded them. That's not philosophy. That's just accounting. He finishes his beer, sets the bottle down on the patio beside his chair. The afternoon light is shifting now, going amber at the edges, the kind of light that makes ordinary backyards look briefly significant. He thinks about the future in the way that people do when they've stopped being afraid of it. Not with a plan, exactly. Not with the structured optimism of someone who has downloaded a self-improvement routine and committed to the process. Just with a mild, open curiosity. Maybe he'll date again. Maybe not for a while. Maybe the next person he trusts will find him harder to reach than he used to be. And maybe that's fair, and maybe it isn't, but it's honest. And honesty, he has decided, is the only currency he's willing to trade in now. He's not looking for closure. He stopped believing in closure as a destination some time ago. What he found instead was something more durable, the ordinary forward motion of a life that belongs entirely to him. No one is waiting for him inside. No one is lying to him. No one is performing a version of love while quietly dismantling everything it was supposed to mean. The yard is still. The light is gold. Somewhere down the street, a neighbor is mowing their lawn, and the sound of it is completely, perfectly ordinary. Ryan leans back in his chair, closes his eyes, and lets the last of the afternoon sun fall across his face. Tomorrow, he'll go to the gym. He'll go to work. He'll manage his supply chains and track his moving parts, and notice, with the trained patience of someone who has always been good at this, when something somewhere is off. And if it ever is again, he'll know what to do. Not because he's angry, not because he's waiting, but because he's learned, at some cost, what it means to pay attention. The lawnmower hums in the distance. The light fades slowly. The yard holds its quiet, and Ryan stays in it, unhurried, until the stars come out.